And password she used was my name. I design locks for people who don't believe in doors. That's the shortest way to explain my work without confessing too much. Companies hire me when they want their buildings to look generous and behave like vaults. I read blueprints the way other men read diaries. If a hinge squeaks, I hear the sentence it's trying not to say. That's how I met Mara. She called my firm from a number that didn't trace to her, introduced herself only as the event lead, and asked for a rush audit on a penthouse ahead of a weekend full of investors. The building was one of those glass stacks that make rain look expensive. The client on paper was her husband, Lucien Bell, the kind of fintech hero who says words like decentralize in rooms built to centralize everything. I'd filmed him once for a compliance video, all polished virtue and timelines. Mara was nothing like that. She greeted me in the lobby wearing slate and calm and a small smile that argued gently with gravity. The elevator mirrored us into a temporary kind of intimacy. She didn't bother with small talk until we hit the top floor and the doors threw us into his view. "It's not my home," she said quietly. "I just keep it alive." The penthouse was a study in glass and restraint. A low brass bowl of oranges sat on a table like proof someone human had been here. She walked me through rooms that had memorized their angles. When we reached the office, she held the door instead of opening it and looked at me in a way that made me check whether I had something on my face. "Before we go in," she said, "do you believe in clumsy miracles?" "I install them," I said. She pushed the door and took me to the far wall where a keypad slept beside a piece of framed shoreline. "Emergency override," she said, nodding at the little black rectangle. I asked for a verbal code because he likes voice toys. The programmer said I could set a fallback pattern. I said it and forgot I said it. Yesterday I was trying to reset the lights after a surge, and I realized what I typed. "What did you type?" She watched my hands. I pressed the keys she had not told me. 426. The keyboard beeped twice in a tone I'd chosen for other clients. The panel lit green. The word unlock felt like it had considered other options first. "Why that?" I asked, hearing my name in the beeps because I knew the mapping. Letters to numbers, phone keyboard logic that still lives in fingers, 4 for I, 2 for A, 6 for N. "Because I was trying not to type anything true," she said, and the way her mouth formed the word true made the room feel slightly uneven. "You came once to fix a door that wouldn't decide if it was open or closed. You didn't flirt with me while I was deciding what kind of woman I was. Most days I'm tired of being the kind that other people pick." It had been a year since that door, 3 minutes in a hallway while a hotel convinced itself it was private. I remembered the way she'd thanked me, brief, exact, the opposite of performative. "Smart locks remember more than we want them to," I said, and she laughed with zero softness. "People do too," she said. "Can you make this place safe without turning it into a confession?" In the office, the desk had a confidence I usually only see in men. His chair had as much personality as a lawsuit. The wall across from it hid a server cabinet in disguise, white oak slats with just enough give to pass air and secrets. I pulled the panel, noted the mesh, the controller, the router that hummed like a cat too pleased with itself. "Your uplink pushes copies of everything," I said. "Door events, camera pings, heat maps of people pretending they're not interested in each other." "Where to?" she asked. "Not here," I said. "A mirror bucket at a cloud you don't own." "Lucian." "Maybe," I said, "or someone who likes him enough to keep the receipts." We walked. The master bedroom faced a skyline dressed as a thesis. A second keypad sat by the closet, this one for the safe behind a panel that believed it was art. I logged the hardware and listened to the room. Rooms talk if you learn how. In the kitchen, she slid me a glass of water like an invitation to refuse. I need 3 things, she said. 1. Stop the mirror without alerting whoever said it. 2. Give me a way to lock 3 internal doors with my phone and not his. 3. Tell me what happens to my life if the mirror is him and not someone else. Your life, I said, becomes a room you didn't design. She pressed her fingers flat to the counter and nodded. The ring on her hand, modest, intentional, caught the light as if disagreeing with it. I mapped the space for sensors and made a list of the lies the building had already learned to tell. The override in the office chimed once when I reprogrammed the admin channel, soft as breath. I set her a private route. A lift of her windowsill would join 2 copper wires I ran under the molding, and the system would think it had heard the words she used to hate. Now it would listen only to her. By dusk, investor staff were sending crates of things that go on charcuterie boards. Catering rehearsed menus that taste like deals. I stood on the terrace and traced lines in my head. Sight lines, exit lines, the lines people cross when they decide to stop lying to themselves. Why him? I asked finally, and she didn't pretend not to know what I meant. Because stories are thirsty and he's the glass, she said. Because I believed I could pour differently. He believes he's safe, I said. He believes he's inevitable, she said, then added almost kindly, it's a burden. I left near the hour when buildings practice being moody. On my way out, I passed a man in a jacket that had never been discounted. He gave me the look owners give to people who fix things, grateful without paying attention. He walked to the penthouse with the gait of people who expect rooms to hold their shape. I found out later that his name was Harris, and his job was to keep anything messy on other floors. Overnight, I remoted into the mirror bucket through a hole the programmer had left in the metadata. I salted the logs with benign anomalies, fake maintenance pings, phantom thermostat resets, so if anyone checked, they'd think the system had a cold. I copied the last 30 days of door events. The pattern was domestic if you squinted. Her, cleaners, a trainer at 7 a.m., Lucian rare as eclipse. At 2 in the morning, a new credential appeared. Not Lucian. Someone had created a badge for Consultant J. Vale, then used it to enter at 2:17 and leave at 2:24. Vale is a name that buys good tables. The log said the elevator never stopped. Only the penthouse did. I printed nothing. I touched nothing physical. I memorized the shape of the forgery, then cut the mirror's pipe with a patch that looked like a firmware bug. If you looked at the right graph, it would appear to have failed by accident while trying to be helpful. Investor Day cloaked itself in linen and intent. I dressed like I belonged to someone's logistics and wore the kind of badge that answers questions before they're asked. Mara moved through it all with the calm of a storm eye. At noon, she pressed my phone into my hand for show, returned it for real, and let her fingers remain an extra half-second on mine. We had become 2 people passing a very small, very bright object across a crowded room. In the afternoon, Lucian arrived with a smile that fit news anchors and board slides. He touched Mara's elbow like an editor. He shook hands and caused women to forget words. He called Harris friend and made it sound like a threat. When the last panel ended, he pulled Mara aside to the office and closed the door almost quietly. The penthouse cameras keep privacy zones in bedrooms and bathrooms. Offices are not bedrooms. I didn't watch. I did stand in the hall and listen with the ears you grow when you've lived in buildings this long. I heard nothing until I heard the small, heavy sound a ring makes on wood. "Who is J. Vale?" I asked when she found me on the terrace 10 minutes later, face clean, breath controlled. A future that tried to arrive early, she said. He thinks my last name belongs in his portfolio. He is wrong. Lucien saw the logs. Lucien saw that I wasn't at fault the way he prefers people not to be, she said. He believes Harris invented the badge so he could pretend not to notice certain men taking the same elevator as certain women. I didn't correct him. I fired Harris anyway. You have that authority. I have that tone, she said. The board assumes it's theirs when it's convenient. Sun dropped deeper. The penthouse became its own photograph. Inside, glasses clinked with the relief of money that thinks it survived. I walked the perimeter, flicked the relay by the bar, checked the copper whisper at her sill, listening still. When the donors left, a smaller circle remained. Men in jackets that don't crease and women who don't put their bags down. Lucien's smile had the thinnest of edges now, as if he'd sanded it in a hurry. At the end, he kissed Mara's cheek and told her she was a miracle of logistics. It sounded like a sentence rehearsed for years. He left with Vale. I watched the elevator close on them with the wonder people reserve for a magic trick, even after they learn how it's done. The penthouse settled. Staff cleaned like it was choreography. Mara disappeared into the office, then reappeared at the threshold and crooked a finger like a subtle arrest. The desk drawer gave up a ledger I'd flagged earlier. Not the real one, the performance one. Under it, a thinner book wrapped in craft paper held receipts that could star in the kind of story regulators tell each other after drinks. Donation patterns, shell companies with botanical names, dates that lined up with votes anyone could check. At the back, a card sleeve, empty, light footprint of a drive the size of a fingernail. He took it, I said. He never leaves the house empty, she said. Makes him feel vulnerable. You want the mirror back online, I said. She shook her head. I want to be the only one with a mirror. Then we pull from his pocket rather than his cloud, I said. She regarded me like a question she hoped she knew the answer to. Can you do that? I can give you a 5-minute window, I said. After that, the building will remember what it believes about itself. We waited for the lobby call, Lucien's car returning, Lucien's habit of forgetting a speech he wanted to practice into the air of his office once before sleeping. When the elevator pinged that second time, I let my little firmware bug sneeze again. The hallway lights dimmed an inch. The office lock forgot itself in a way only we would notice. Mara slipped in, the hem of her slate dress brushing my wrist like intention. I stood in the doorway and became a door. She moved fast. The painting swung on oiled hinges. The safe thought about being dramatic and then agreed not to be. Her hands knew the choreography of other people's pride. The velvet tray lifted. A smaller velvet beneath it confessed a hidden shelf. The drive wasn't where it should be, she smiled, not pleasantly, and pressed the walnut trim at a point only someone who wants to know would test. A shallow cavity invited 2 fingers. The plastic sliver sat inside like a moral, light, hard, necessary. She slipped it into the case under her hairline, the kind of place men notice but never check and women memorize without trying. I closed the painting, clicked the lock, took one slow breath that we shared without speaking. She stepped close, palm finding the back of my neck for 1 second and then 2, forehead resting just under my jaw, that very small admission people make when they need a room to hold them up and the room chooses a human instead. I kissed her hair, not her mouth. Heat was not optional. Decency was not impossible. We parted like professionals. She walked out with hands empty. I walked out with gravity. In the elevator, Lucien smiled for practice at no one. When he reached his office, he found a perfect arrangement of objects auditioning for honesty. He practiced his speech. He left again. We didn't go home together. That wasn't our story. I met a reporter I trusted in a diner that didn't pretend to be anything. I said only 3 things: verify everything, protect the innocent, and if a woman's name gets dragged, I will light your server room with the same care I light my buildings. She's careful. She nodded. A month passed. The paper ran a quiet, devastating series that focused on process, not sins. The board made a show of surprise and a palate-cleansing investigation. Lucian went on television and promised oversight into a mirror. Vale landed on a different yacht for a while. Harris opened a consultancy that would keep the wrong kind of secrets for the right kind of money. And Mara, the day after the third piece ran, she texted, "Coffee at the place with the bad cups." I went. She was there in slate and calm, wearing a face that had resigned from a committee and started a movement. Her ring finger was bare and unapologetic. "I'm leaving without drama," she said. "Drama thinks it's entitled to evidence." "How's the door that isn't yours?" I asked. "Safer," she said, "for now." We talked about ordinary things with extraordinary relief. When we stood to go, she reached for my hand, then didn't, then did. The touch was brief, like a password you don't want anyone to memorize. At the corner, she turned back and smiled in that small, undefeated way I'd first noticed in the elevator. "Thank you for not using the obvious key," she said. "You changed it," I said. "I changed everything," she said, "but I still remember what I typed, in case you ever forget who you were in this." I don't forget. Some nights, when the city is busy rehearsing its kindnesses, I hear the soft double beep of a lock remembering a name it shouldn't know. My name. I remember the tilt of her head when she said truth and made it sound like we had options. I remember how a ring sounded on wood and how it didn't sound later when it was gone. I remember that I am a man who builds quiet into loud spaces, and that sometimes quiet is the bravest narrative. Mara runs events for people who think ethics can be catered. I fix buildings for people who think safety can be designed like a smile. We see each other when windows fog on purpose. We keep our heat where it belongs and our hands where we can claim them. If we touch, it is the way a hinge touches a door. Firm, necessary, built to hold and let go. And inside a server log that would read as noise to anyone else, there's a line that only 2 people can parse. An old override, retired but not forgotten. A reminder that once a room opened because she asked it to with my name, and I opened because she asked me to with hers, and no one else got to keep the key.